Can you provide some insights on how you master the art of delivering effective talks and what tips or strategies you have for aspiring speakers?
Well, I can tell you I've learned the things not to do. Maybe I'll start there. I always like a positive reframe. So I'll just tell you that one of the things I had to learn the hard way is I can get up in front of a room full of people and I just adapt a different persona. There's the introverted Cynthia that likes quiet surroundings with smaller groups of people. And then I step on stage and I'm like, I'm an educator, I'm a teacher. That's really what I'm stepping into. But when I was a more novice speaker, my nervous energy, the way that I worked it out was I would move. Now, as you can imagine, that gets distracting when you have someone who's moving back and forth. So if you happen to see my first or second TED Talk, give me grace because now I know I stay planted. I might move, but then I'm planted. And so one of the first things that I learned from a really good speaking coach was to plant myself, say a couple points and plant and then pivot, but don't move back and forth. So it can be distracting. But that's how many of us have to learn, how do you deal with that nervous energy? So for me, I have breathing exercises that I do before I get on stage to regulate my autonomic nervous system so that not only is my speech and elocution is spot on, but it also allows me to get very centered. So for me, I have a whole kind of process that I go through. It's not very complicated, but I'll do box breathing, I'll do guided imagery. That's what I do before I get on stage. And there's actually a song. I don't know why this song in particular really appeals to me, but in my mind, it's a song that allows me to get into this extroverted side of myself. So there's a Metallica song, Enter Sandman, which I don't know why. Someone was laughing one day. They're like, how in the world? And I was like, I don't know why, but it gets me excited. And so I listen to things. I do that guided imagery. I do the breathing exercises. Then I stand on stage and I try very hard to make sure that I've made eye contact with a couple key areas. There's someone with a smiling face in the audience and I'm talking to them. And so I'm thinking as I'm speaking that I'm making sure that I don't just look in the same direction, that I look around, that I use my hands. We know based on research, if you are someone that stands there frozen like a pencil, you are not going to be perceived as good of a speaker as if you're a little more relaxed, you use your hands, and not that you're using them excessively, but gestures, and it confers a degree of warmth. So when I think about the things that have been most helpful, it's making sure you have a system before you get on stage to calm yourself down if you're someone that gets nervous. Number two, acknowledge that it's okay to move, but not too much. It's all relative. Number three, find a smiling, happy looking person in the audience and speak to them. And people love when you make eye contact with them. It makes them feel connected. It makes them feel a sense of warmth. The other thing is be really clear about who you're speaking to. So if you're getting up in front of a group of women, don't talk about something that's not relevant. That's why before we started recording, I said, tell me a little bit about your audience, because I want to make sure what I'm sharing is relevant and to make sure that it is going to be helpful and actionable. The other thing that I think is really important is to not put up too many slides. I've been guilty of this myself. When you're at a medical conference, as an example, too many slides and people pay attention to the slides and not you. And I think a lot of people sometimes put a lot of slides up because it makes them feel like they're focusing on the flow of the discussion. But what it really does is it detracts from you. The last thing that I would say that I've found to be, super helpful in terms of speaking is to step outside your comfort zone. If I only spoke to people that were interested in intermittent fasting or metabolic health, that's all I did all the time, that would not allow me to grow. So I like to speak on a variety of topics. My team knows this. It's always finding out someone's niche. How can we serve them? What would be of greatest interest? And actually, the way I grow is when I have to talk about things I'm less familiar with, I haven't spoken about before. I'll give you an example. In July, I was asked to speak at a mastermind event for couples. And so I'm going to actually be talking about relationships, especially with your partner. I've been married for almost 20 years, and they really wanted to know, what's it like to be an entrepreneur and exist in a marriage, and how do you make it work? And so this is a very different type of conversation that I'm going to have because it's very personal. A lot of times I can get on stage, I may be able to talk a little bit about my children or some little story about myself, but talking about my marriage and my husband and my relationship with my husband, that's really personal, but it's also very freeing because I know that people are curious, what are the things I do to make my business work in the construct of having a happy, healthy marriage? And so I think those are the things that, had I known about before, would have really helped me as a speaker. But I think sometimes the way that we learn is by doing things not in the most ideal way. And then you can go back and course correct. So again, if someone sees either of those talks and thinks, gosh, Cynthia's moving around a lot, I didn't yet know how to focus my nervous energy. So now I do. So if you see me talk now, I don't move around a whole lot. It's like I walk and plant and I talk and then I walk and plant, but I don't go back and forth.
And how have you incorporated humor into your talks as well? Because I know that's something that a lot of keynote speakers do.
Well, I think on a lot of different levels that when we incorporate humor, it allows people to see that we're human. It allows people to relax and laugh. It makes things a little less serious. It's in my nature to sometimes be snarky, but never at anyone's expense. Let me be clear. But I think humor can allow people to see that there's more to you than just this shell of a clinician or this human being. And so the one thing I've learned is that when I watch really talented speakers talk, it's that connection. So whether it's laughter, whether it's a storytelling, whether it's the sharing of mutual shared goals, it's the connection piece. It allows people to see you're a real person. I think humor is very important. It has to be used carefully, obviously. I always say you want things to be funny, but you don't want it to be at the expense of someone else. So I think that's also very important. It's just the delivery, I think, can be something that needs to be structured very carefully, but not in a way where you have to make it overcomplicated. I think sometimes simple humor is sometimes the best way you can go.